Hi, my name is Jamie Hadfield with Legends Health, Wellness, and Performance, and today I have Dr. Stan Gardner with us. He is an anti-aging rejuvenation board certified physician, and he also is a clinical nutrition specialist and also board certified in that as well. He is a functional medicine practitioner, practices a little bit of integrative and also brings in alternative medicine into his practice. So welcome, Dr. Stan Gardner.
Well, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah. So with your practice, what type of patients do you typically see?
I was trained in the broad spectrum of functional medicine. So kind of a generalist. A lot of what I see is hormones. I see a lot of gastrointestinal illnesses. I was recently certified with the Bredesen technique or the Bredesen protocol for Alzheimer's disease, which is the only certification, only program, only protocol in the United States that actually has been proven to slow down and reverse the ongoing disease process of Alzheimer's disease, which of course makes me very qualified in all of the dementias and memory loss, and because that program is very good. So I will be seeing a lot more of that. I have seen a fair amount in the neurologic field with the Parkinson's disease, with dementias, depression, anxiety, which is all part of the neurologic field. One of my major interests is energy medicine, and I bring energy medicine to the table. I was originally trained with Jin Shin Jitsu. Jin Shin Jitsu is an energy art that comes from Japan, and it is akin to acupuncture, only it uses the hands instead of needles to move the energy through the body. As we know,
is that pressure points, just like with needles, but just pressure points?
Those are certain very specific points that are in the body, but we don't really have to exert pressure on them. It's just our flow points. They call them safety energy locks, but they are flow points that bring the energy in a certain direction for healing purposes. I have worked with a frequency-specific microcurrent, which is a machine that has healing frequencies, and have had very good success with those healing frequencies. I've also done NAET, Nambudrapad allergy elimination technique, which is the use of acupressure points, muscle testing. When I was in my 20 years of conventional medicine, I was actually the allergist for 9 years. And I did conventional allergy, which was the skin tests and the allergy shots. When I shifted into functional medicine, then I decided that I no longer wanted to do that it was outside that realm. So I, 2 years later, found this technique and started practicing NAET. It has some other things mixed in with it, some of Cutler's food allergy elimination techniques, but I discovered after using that technique for a couple of years that it was absolutely just as successful as the shots were when I was doing shots. But the nice thing about this allergy desensitization is that we can do chemicals, which can't be done in conventional medicine. We can do foods, which can't be done, and any product can actually be muscle tested and put into the desensitization process. So all of these are energy pathways, energy techniques. My contention and the contention of energy medicine really is that if the energy isn't fixed, then the physical body really is not going to get fixed. And energy is the medicine of the future. But I have this slide that says energy is the medicine of the future right now because it's available.
That is an extensive background in medicine. I want to focus on the allergies, and then I want to go back and focus on Bredesen. But with the allergy techniques, when you're seeing a conventional medicine physician, those tests are typically just blood or skin tests. They do skin testing.
Yeah, I did skin testing, and they do a limited amount of IgE-mediated testing. In our functional medicine world, we recognize that although IgE is the classic allergy response that conventional medicine is looking for, we find that there are far more sensitivities, may not be full allergic reaction as they define it, but the sensitivities manifest in much the same way, but it is really IgG mediated rather than IgE mediated.
Well, because I have a lot of physicians that have said that, well, I've heard in my research there's a difference between the food sensitivities, food intolerances, and then a full-blown allergies. So for how does a physician define those three?
The water's a little muddied in those areas. The classic IgE-mediated allergy is the allergy as it's defined by conventional medicine.
Okay.
And so conventional medicine really defines allergies. They hypersensitivities or sensitivities to certain things, you're not going to see the life-threatening problems with that you're going to see with IgE-mediated peanut allergy, for instance.
Okay.
So it's just the GI problems, the headaches, the inflammatory responses that are the hypersensitivity to foods or to chemicals. Those are sensitivities that probably are not true allergies, but the manifestation in the body and the symptoms all overlap. Intolerances like gluten, celiac disease, is that the enzyme that's needed to break down the gluten isn't there. So you're totally intolerant. Doesn't matter whether you're not really allergic to it, but you can't take it because you do not have the enzymes to break that down.
So is that developed, or is that genetics, or is that because of the food that you're eating? Why specifically does people not have those enzymes? Because your body can make enzymes in a variety of different ways. We can make it from our saliva, we can make it from our gut. Our pancreas has a certain amount of enzymes. So is the celiac, is that strictly genetics, or can we create an additional enzymes?
Good question. And I'm not sure that the answer is totally clear.
Oh.
And that's part of why you're probably asking the question is because most people get diagnosed with celiac disease, not at birth, but in childhood or later on. And it's a diagnosis made by getting actually a biopsy of the small intestinal tract. And the villi, which are the enzyme surfaces and the absorption surfaces, have been flattened, and so they can't produce the enzymes, can't produce the ability to absorb because of a sensitivity or an overreaction, an inflammatory reaction to gluten, which they can't digest. So is that a genetic? I work with Hashimoto's. It is an autoimmune disease. The immune system has attacked the thyroid. I know that 90% of all people with Hashimoto's is going to have a gluten at least sensitivity, probably not celiac disease. But if we draw the antibodies to the celiac disease, they will come up positive. But typically one way to never be diagnosed is to know that you're sensitive to gluten, not be on it. The villi are intact, and the biopsy is normal. But if you get on gluten, which is really the only way to prove you have celiac disease, be on gluten long enough to totally destroy your intestinal tract, and then get a biopsy, and then you can be told that you have celiac disease.
So let's educate a little bit, because my understanding, when we say gluten today, we mean barley, wheat, and rye. But what about other grains? Because we know that oatmeal and rice, they have just a different type of gluten in them. So when you're saying gluten-free, define that for me.
Well, what I tell my patients is if they're gluten sensitive, they need to stay away from wheat, rye, and barley. Most people can get away with the oats, the amount of gluten or the kind of gluten that is in oats. If you're super sensitive to gluten, you can't do the oats either. I'm not aware that gluten is in some of the other grains. So those are the only grains that I visit with my patients about.
Okay. Okay, so diet seems like a very large part of gut healing and inflammation in the functional medicine space. So how much of your time, and what are you looking at when we're saying, because there's a lot of different definitions of leaky gut or intestinal permeability. How are you defining that? And is that really the base of all other diseases and the base of inflammation, or can inflammation happen other places?
Let's start one step back.
Okay.
And that is when I see a patient for the first time, there's two things that I put all of them on. One, most of them are coming in with a bad diet. There are those people that come to see me that are on the great diet, they're already on their supplements, and they just want to stay healthy. And I can keep them more healthy because of the background that I bring to the table.
Okay.
But the majority of people are on the standard American diet, the SAD diet, and they're drinking their pop and their sugar, and they're ruining their whole body. I consider sugar a toxin. So when people come to see me for the first time, there's a lot of lab that I get so that I can be very specific in treating them, but everybody has to clean up their diet or nothing is going to work. And they need to be on supplements. It's my contention that the nutritive value of even the best of food today isn't enough to keep up with the toxin exposures we're getting, the poor food quality that we're exposed to, even if it's organic. It's just, we need to supplement our basic nutrition.
So what would be the top 3 supplements that you're constantly prescribing?
Well, I put everybody on a multivitamin. I put everybody on vitamin D. I put everybody on oils, omega-3, omega-6 oils. The next most common thing is the probiotics, because a lot of people have the gut stuff going on. The interesting thing about some of the gut stuff is that the gut and the brain are intimately connected. There's 9 times more pathways going from the gut to the brain than there is going from the brain to the gut. So that if anyone comes in with neurologic difficulties, with depression, with anxiety, with any of the neurodegenerative diseases, if we ignore the gut and all that input the gut is giving to the brain, then we've ignored a major part of the treatment of all neurologic disease.
And that's the basis of Bredeson's protocol for Alzheimer's, correct?
Well, Bredeson's protocol basically is that his original protocol is there's 36 holes in the roof.
Okay.
And you have a certain number of them. 10 to 15 of those holes you have, and that's why you are progressing along the Alzheimer's scale. A certain number of those, probably not all 10 to 15, need to be plugged up, need to be identified, need to be worked with, and until we reach that magic number of filling those holes, then it's going to continue to progress. And if it continues to progress with filling 5 or 8 holes, you haven't filled enough. And you have to go aggressively either with lab work or with being more aggressive with the diet. It's just a big, huge protocol looking at multiple areas.
But isn't that really hard when people are already forgetful? I mean, that's what Alzheimer's dementia is. They're already forgetful. So then I would assume that you have to get a family member quite involved to help them with their diet or to follow the protocol, because it seems like they would be forgetting what you're trying to communicate to them.
We want to see them 10 years before they can be diagnosed. Because 10 years before, they're going to say, my memory is going. That's going to be the first thing to go. If we see them there, they are never going to progress to dementia and Alzheimer's. That's when we want to stop it.
So this is really prevention of Alzheimer's.
This is treatment also. But if we can prevent it, wow, we are way ahead of the game. Mild Alzheimer's is just beginning, or dementia is where it really starts. And they really don't fulfill all the criteria of Alzheimer's, but they've got the dementia component of it. We want to pick that up early and not let it progress. There's a number of very difficult to diagnose diagnoses out there in the world, and people come into me and have a lot of MS symptoms, but they've done the x-rays, the CAT scans, it's not showing up. I say, well, there's two things. We can ignore this and let it progress. And in 5 years, you're going to have a diagnosis of probably MS. Or we can treat you now and be aggressive with it, and you will never know what your diagnosis is, but you will be symptom-free or much better off than you are today. So there's a lot of things that are in that category. We feel in functional medicine that we can prevent the long-term problems. And that's where we would like to be treating people.
So this sounds really intensive. So how long are you typically staying with a patient, like your patient visits? What's the time frame? Because this seems like you can get through all this in a 15-minute visit.
Well, the average time in conventional medicine with a doctor is 8.5 minutes. And yeah, we can't do anything in 8.5 minutes.
Somewhere I read that Alzheimer's is, I think now, do you know what the statistics are? I think it's like the third leading cause. It's growing.
Yeah, I think it's the sixth leading cause of death. But, you know, when you say someone died of such and such, you know, what did they really die from? You know, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. Well, they died because they died. And they were sick because of diabetes, or sick because of cardiovascular disease, or their brain was neurodegenerative diseases were going on. An interesting comment is, nobody has seen an Alzheimer's survivor. They just keep deteriorating until they die. We do see breast cancer survivors. 5-10 years later, they're free of breast cancer, but there are no Alzheimer's survivors. And so we're trying to change that and actually try to reverse that at the early stages.
I know with the genetics that I've studied that if people have like an E3, E4, they're more susceptible. When they look at their genetics, they're more susceptible. From a genetic standpoint, are there some people that are more susceptible to Alzheimer's when you're looking at the genetic profile?
We look at an ApoE genetic code. And it's labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. The ApoE4, they have a 15 times, if they have ApoE4 from both parents, they have a 15 times greater risk of Alzheimer's. If they have ApoE4 from one parent, they have about a 5 times increased risk. If they have ApoE3 and 3, that's the normal risk in the population. Okay. If they have an ApoE2, that is actually protective against Alzheimer's. So yeah, there is certainly a genetic component. And that's one of the things we want to look at is there's another genetic component called MTHFR, which is a genetic dysfunction with methylation. And methylation is really kind of the turning on and off of certain genes, the turning on and off of certain vitamins so they work better. And so if they have an enzyme deficiency, the MTHFR enzyme deficiency, then they can't turn on things and turn off things like they should, and so they're at increased risk. And again, if they get that from both parents, the functioning of that system is at 30%, which will definitely manifest with disease. If you have the MTHFR with one heterozygous from one of the parents, then it's functioning about 70%. And most of the functions in our body, if they're at 70%, they're going to do just fine. When the body is stressed, it now can't raise up to the 100%. And so during that highly stressed period, that some of those symptoms may manifest.
Well, we hear a lot about, when you're saying stress, is there a difference between well, my understanding, there's a difference just between stress and oxidative stress. And you have a great video that I watched on where you explained oxidative stress. Can you share what that means to the public?
There are so many ways that the body is stressed.
Okay.
And it can be emotional. It can be physical. You can be ill. You can have broken bone. The number of stressors, the environment, the toxins in the environment, all these are stressors to the body. Oxidative stress or inflammation. We are constantly producing oxidation. Our body is in this redox state where we are going from an oxidative state into a reduction, which means the oxidation has been neutralized. In our body, when we exercise, we burn a lot of calories, and we actually produce a lot of oxidation during the process of exercise. But our body has a lot of the antioxidant systems to just immediately take care of that. When the body gets too much oxidation, when we get a degenerative disease, then that oxidation is going to occur and actually accelerate the problem. We talk about free radicals, and basically free radicals are the damaging oxidation. And when those free radicals hit a nucleus, it can change the nucleus and change it toward a cancerous state. They've changed the cell itself. Those free radicals can hit a blood vessel and cause oxidative damage and open up for a clot to form or for a plaque to form in that place. Oxidation taking place in the knees and with rheumatoid arthritis. So oxidation is both a product of disease, a product of normal metabolism, but oxidative stress is when that oxidation gets way out of hand. Then we need to bring in antioxidants to neutralize the damage that's taking place in that oxidative stress condition.
So what are some of our top antioxidant type foods that we can put in? Because that we're getting those antioxidants from our foods, correct? Or can we get antioxidants from...
There are so many places we can get antioxidants. The outside of a grape, the outside of fruit that is being bombarded from the sun, that bombardment from the sun is oxidative. And if the outside, the shell or the skin of the grape or other fruits and vegetables don't have a lot of antioxidants in them, then that oxidative damage that the sun brings into the grape would enter into the cell and actually oxidize it and make it very poor. So there's a lot of antioxidants in the skin of a lot of fruits.
Is that with vegetables as well?
Not quite as much, but the fruits are high in that. Vitamin C is very good. Vitamin E, the oils, the vitamin E oil, all of the tocopherols are very good with antioxidants. Glutathione, catalase, and superoxide dismutase are the three major antioxidant systems that are inside of our body. And we can bring in the components of those systems so your body will actually make more of them. N-acetylcysteine is one of the three components of glutathione. And there are now liposomal glutathione combinations that will actually be absorbed into the body and add to the glutathione or the antioxidative processes of the body.
So my understanding when you're saying liposomal, it just means it's been fragmented or became into a smaller molecule so the body can actually receive the information.
Yeah,
Is
lipo
that correct?
of course refers to lipid, which is fat. So they've been able to put the glutathione into a kind of a fat molecule so that it can be absorbed. There are too many barriers in the body that need a fat molecule to enter into and pass through the barriers in the body. So the liposomal or the fat soluble is one way to get molecules that are difficult to get into the body into the body.
Okay. Okay. Earlier, you had said that you work with a lot of Lyme patients as well. And I would think that this oxidation, this stress would become really important for those Lyme patients because they're chronically ill. I think they're probably always, their body's not able to take care of the stress.
Lyme disease is a challenging disease at best. Of course, we always hope we can get it early, and if we get it early in the first few weeks of the bite and the disease process, we can be quite successful with what we have. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, most people had a bite 10 years ago that may or may not have been the bite, but for the last 6 years they've had symptoms that are consistent with Lyme. Mm-hmm. Part of our problem in the whole Lyme disease arena is that the laboratory diagnoses are not as well fine-tuned. I mean, with diabetes, we get a blood sugar, we get an insulin, we can tell exactly what's going on. But with Lyme disease, there's the various laboratory results that aren't always positive, even though all the symptoms are there and we know they have Lyme disease. So Lyme disease is almost a disease of exclusion. There's no other good reason to account for this presentation of symptoms. And there are certain things in Lyme disease that are kind of unique to Lyme disease. So we become very aggressive with the treatment very early. And in functional medicine, we tend to use herbs and a lot of other things trying to counteract bacteria and viruses. But if the Lyme disease gets out of control, it's very difficult to treat it. So we are very aggressive at the beginning with several antibiotics, which is outside where I enjoy living. Mm-hmm. But I enjoy even less seeing the long-term effects of untreated Lyme disease.
Well, my understanding with that is that the bugs go dormant, so that when you do the lab testing, they come back negative because the bugs have a life cycle. Explain that process.
Well, there's kind of 4 things that are part of the Lyme issue. One is the spirochete. The Borrelia burgdorferi is a spirochete that is in the tick, and now we know that it's in other things, but traditionally we talk about the tick bite. The spirochete is injected into the body, and it stays as a spirochete and starts moving throughout the body, causes an inflammatory reaction, and that's where we would like to start to treat. Often goes to the joints. That's usually the first place, but then it often ends up doing neurologic things, so we know it gets into the brain. Then eventually it often does some heart things. So those are the 3 major areas where it gets into. But the spirochete itself morphs into a form that is different than the spirochete. And it's a cell wall deficient organism, and a lot of our antibiotics kill an organism because the cell wall is there. It kills the cell wall and the organism dies. So we need a unique antibiotic that is different than the one that treats the spirochete to treat these cell wall deficient organisms that it's morphed into. And then it morphs into a cystic form, which requires a 3rd antibiotic because the other 2 antibiotics really don't treat and kill the cyst form. And then over time, the gut gets this biofilm, and the spirochete or the cyst starts to hide in that biofilm, and the immune system can't even find them, can't even attack them. And the antibiotics can't get in there because it's covered by this biofilm that's in the intestinal tract. So,
wow, that's really complicated.
It's a challenge.
And so, is this a series of treatments that people will need? Because that would seem like, okay, if you need an antibiotic, then we might need to put you on a different antibiotic, and then it sounds like it's a process.
I mean, if they have symptoms, we're typically going at least 6 weeks or 3 months on 1 or 2 or 3 sets of antibiotics. And of course, antibiotics kill the good bacteria that's in the gut. So now we're creating a gut problem. We try to reverse that with probiotics and with supporting the gut. But the Lyme disease is very much a challenge.
Well, I think what you said earlier, I think this is probably when your energy work comes into play. You're passionate about energy work, and I would think that the energy, because here where you're doing all these different conventional medicine, functional medicine techniques, and then energy work comes into play, I would assume.
The energy pathways are interfered with in the body. So energy work overcomes those energy pathways. We just try different things. If we stick to Lyme, there is a machine, an energy frequency generator called the Rife machine that has dozens and dozens of specific frequencies for Lyme disease. So energy medicine clearly comes into Lyme disease. Jin Jitsu is going to, if that's where the deficiency lies and we can get energy moving, then the body can start healing better. The immune system is compromised in all Lyme disease patients. One of the things that the spirochete and the Borrelia burgdorferi, or any number of other subtypes in this Borrelia family, affects the immune system and drops the immune system. And energy work builds the immune system also. So we about try everything. Hyperbaric oxygen as a mechanism for killing organisms and killing the spirochete has been found helpful in some people. So there's a whole bunch of in some people, once it's been chronic and it's been going on for years, then we start looking at other things as possibilities. And one thing will work in one patient, another thing may work in another patient. So it's complicated.
Yeah, it sounds extremely complicated. Now, is the basis this? I would think that this would also, because you said that you were an anti-aging rejuvenation, and most people, when I say anti-aging, I think of hormones. And I would think all of these diseases that we've talked about, the neurodegenerative diseases, the Lyme disease, that they would all affect the hormones and the aging process somehow.
Hormones diminish with age. All of the hormones diminish with age. The testosterone, DHEA, and these are important hormones. Testosterone has a lot to do with your drive, motivation, libido, building muscles, having strength, and whether you're a male or a female. And so as that diminishes, then middle-aged men just don't have any drive and they become couch potatoes. And they try to get to work, and they get through work, but then they just come home exhausted and they just sit on the couch and read the paper and watch TV, and they're nothing. And you get them on testosterone and all of a sudden there's life. Estrogen, of course, with women, and they get into menopause, the ovaries stop working, which produce the progesterone, produce the estrogen, and cycle that. And some women, but not all, have this horrible perimenopause and menopausal experience. Other women just go right through it asymptomatic. I do think there is enough evidence that shows that reasonably good levels of testosterone and reasonably good levels of estrogen throughout your life is brain protective and heart protective. And so I introduced that concept with older patients that say, I don't have any problems, but I do get hormone levels on really everybody I see. And if they're low, then I talk about the potential benefit and would start low and just kind of be more a protection of the heart and the brain. And of course, if we go back to Bredeson's protocol and the Alzheimer's, then that's part of that, because estrogen and testosterone are good for the brain. So that's one of the things, one of those patches, one of those 36 patches.
Well, it seems like functional medicine really takes this 30,000-foot view and looks at the body from a systems biology approach. And definitely just even this conversation here, I can see that you're not looking just at a specific, here's the cardiology. I can see that you're looking at the body from a 30,000-foot view and looking at the system as a whole. And recently in the media, we have heard about this endocannabinoid system. Can you share what your knowledge on this is, because it's a fairly new system that physicians have found recently about?
The endocannabinoid system is actually a system of receptors in our body that we didn't even know existed 40 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't know when it was actually discovered, but certainly when I went to medical school 40 plus years ago, it was not one of the systems that we learned about. And there's a number of things that have been discovered since I went to medical school. So keeping up with the times becomes important in the world of functional medicine, in the world of all medicine. If you look at the volume of new material that is hitting the medical field, it doubles about every 5 years.
Wow.
And it's just monumental. So you kind of try to stay current in your field. Of course, the functional medicine field has no limits. And so we kind of get focused on the things we do well, we like to do a lot of, and get really good at it. But this endocannabinoid system is brand new, and that's it is triggered by the CBD oil. There's a whole bunch of cannabinoids that the body makes, including THC, which is what is marijuana, including CBD, which comes mostly from the hemp. And there's a whole realm of cannabinoids the body makes that triggers these systems. So when we know where the receptors are of this endocannabinoid system, then we know what these cannabinoids are going to affect. And there's one of the systems, the CB1 system, is mostly in the brain and in certain areas of the body. A separate system that has been labeled CB2 is more in the immune system and the spleen and those things that support the immune system. And then there's several other receptor sites that the body has these endocannabinoids. We can supply cannabinoids into the body that are the same cannabinoids the body makes. And the one that is presently legal in the United States and in the state of Utah, where I am, is CBD. And so we're just learning all the things that CBD oil is capable of doing. THC, which is the potentially psychoactive component of the marijuana plant, is still illegal in the state of Utah, but it has some unique uses that are not part of what the CBD oil does and can do. So we are excited and working toward being able to access that for our patients. And we think the sooner the better, because there's tens of thousands of patients that would benefit from the full use of cannabinoids from outside the body coming into the body to stimulate those systems.
So it really restores the balance in just the endocannabinoid system, or a variety of systems in the body, or is that just dependent upon where the receptors are?
There are receptors that are responsive to the cannabinoids. One of them is the serotonin system. It actually, one of the receptor sites is the same receptor that serotonin hooks onto, which helps with depression and anxiety in the world out here. So we feel that the CBD is getting onto that system, that receptor site, and actually helping depression and anxiety, because that's one of the receptors that are responsive. There is another receptor, the GABA A receptor, that is a calming or relaxing neurotransmitter in the brain. There are both excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate and calming and relaxing neurotransmitters like GABA. And the GABA receptor is responsive to CBD oil. So that provides a calming effect, and which is probably another reason why it may help with anxiety. And so as we understand these endocannabinoid receptor systems, then we understand more why CBD and THC is going to work in so many different systems. One of the interesting things is THC is the psychoactive component, but as you add CBD oil to the THC, then it modifies and reduces that psychoactive component of the THC. We also know that if you have pure CBD oil without that 0.3%, which is permitted by law as pure CBD oil, if it doesn't have that 0.3% THC, it's not going to work as well as part of the activation of that CBD oil.
No, my understanding was you helped sit with the legislation, and you're also kind of a spokesperson in Utah for cannabis. What are your colleagues, your understanding, because you said that there hasn't been any training and you've had to learn this information on your own. Where do you think your other colleagues, when you do have this conversation with them, where do you feel like your colleagues, is it just they don't understand it, they don't, or...
Colleagues referring to...
Other medical practitioners, physicians, the healthcare professionals.
Well, I think in the functional medicine world, they're for the most part very open to this. In conventional medicine, they are not well trained in herbs, and we're now talking about herbs. We like, if there's something in the medical field, a pharmaceutical that treats a disease, and we have an herb that treats a disease, we can almost across the board say that this pharmaceutical is going to have far more side effects than our herb is going to have side effects. I think it's important to recognize in this world of functional medicine that we are not 100% safe. We need to view, and we do view, herbs like medicines. They are not natural products to the body. Now, the endocannabinoid system and CBD and THC, those are bioidentical. Those are natural products to the body. But there are herbs that have side effects, and we have to be aware of those, just like medicines have side effects. But the side effect profile with herbs is so much smaller, and the chance of dying from an overdose of an herb versus an overdose of a pharmaceutical is just like night and day. So I like the safety profile of the herbs, and here we're talking about a plant. We're talking about an herb that is just naturally in the environment and has been there for 5,000 years.
So how do you feel, because so many people are worried, one, that it's a gateway drug. Another is that it does need to be regulated. So what's your thoughts on how, if there is a psychoactive component to THC, we have a lot of people that are using machinery, work for a construction company and heavy machinery. So how do you feel like this herb should be regulated?
We have a lot of medications that people should not run machinery, having just taken Benadryl. Shouldn't drive with anything that's a sedative. We have the whole opioid epidemic. All the opioids have a sedative side effect. So THC has a sedative and a psychoactivity side effect. It's not what we want. The definition of a side effect is an effect that a medicine or an herb has that's not our desired effect. Everything outside of that is a side effect.
Yeah.
So there are some side effects that are actually very positive. But driving a car in that state of psychoactivity where your brain is kind of dissociated from your body is very dangerous. And just like opioids, and just like a lot of antihistaminics, they need to be cautioned, and some people don't listen to the cautions. And then they go out and run the machinery, and there's a risk. So there are risks to legalizing THC.
But overall, medical cannabis, you're very supportive of. Is that?
Absolutely, because my first experience was an MS patient that came to see me in my functional medicine practice. And she was diagnosed with MS, severe pain in her feet, numbness, tingling, and this sensation had started in the feet and was up her body and tingling in her hands, and a lot of neurologic, neuropathic symptoms. And I worked with her for months, functional medicine, and I got her probably 20-30% better. And anyone that sick and you get them 30% better, that is
big deal.
Big deal. Well, one day she walks up to my office in absolutely no pain. I say, because I watched her walk, and she'd never walked like that. And I said, "What are you doing?" Because I know I didn't do that. And she wouldn't tell me for several minutes. But finally she said, "There's this plant, this herb that I'm taking, and it's helping." The herb, of course, was a THC CBD oil combination. She was already on Percocet. Percocet is a fairly strong opioid, and it, maybe took away 5 or 10% of her pain. Yeah, she stayed on it because it took a little bit away.
Yeah.
But it didn't touch her pain. And she got on this THC CBD 50-50 combination 1-to-1, and her pain was 100% relieved. Wow. And that was my introduction into this world of cannabis. And I thought, I've got to know more about this, because this isn't miraculous. But she had to leave the state of Utah to get it, and then, of course, illegally bring it into the state to use it so she could function in her life. And that was my introduction. But she tried CBD oil with the 0.3%, and it really didn't touch pain. CBD oil is good for a lot of pain, but she needed the THC CBD combination.
Yeah, well, my understanding, CBD really helps the inflammation, and your THC is a little bit more, helps the analgesic, helps the pain part of people. So depending on what's going on with the person, depends on the combination of CBD THC ratio that we would actually need.
And I think that is where we still need research. What is unfortunate is that research was kind of banned in the 1930s and 40s because the hemp and marijuana were put into this Schedule 1 category. To be put into a Schedule 1 category means it has absolutely no benefit medically, and it has significant risks. And it has tremendous benefit, so it never should have been placed there. But now getting it out of there is a huge issue, which shouldn't have to be a huge issue because it obviously should never have been there and should be moved out. But where was I going with this? What was
the combination of THC, CBD?
Oh, so research was stopped. And of course, some of the legislators and the medical association saying, well, we need more research.
Yeah.
Well, you're the ones that stopped the research And now, 50 years later, you're saying you need more research, but you refuse to let research take place. So I see this whole issue as, are we going to not make available to tens of thousands of patients in Utah, because that's where I'm from, the ability to have their pain and their suffering and their relieved with appropriate medical use of marijuana? Or are we going to have the fear and the emotional set that is part of the resistance of letting that come into the state of Utah, the THC component of it?
And do you...
But we don't have the research. We need more research. What is the combination? How much THC and CBD should be in to treat schizophrenia? Because too much THC is actually probably going to make schizophrenia worse. So where is that? What is the combination? What's going to be best for my gut? What's going to be best for my RA and all the inflammation that's there? What is best for pain management? A little bit of it is trial and error. But we do that in the practice of medicine anyway.
Yeah.
We have a whole bunch of antibiotics. Is this bacteria going to respond to this antibiotic? Oh, maybe it's this one. Or maybe it's this one. Or this antidepressant. Or this antidepressant. Or this category of antidepressant. We do that same thing in medicine already. So I don't see that as some new experiment that is coming into the practice of medicine.
Okay. And how do you feel like physicians should learn about the medicine? Does it need to come from, because you go to other states and it's really the bud tenders at the dispensaries that are teaching the patient about it, because the physicians don't have...
Because they know.
Yeah.
They know the most about it.
Yeah.
So if a physician doesn't have the ability to say, I want a 1-to-1 combination or a 1-to-6 combination, physicians aren't going to have that ability. So they're going to put their trust in people that do run the dispensaries like they do in California and Colorado. They are very knowledgeable. And they say, well, this is probably going to work best for you in your condition. But they're going to try it and may try some different combinations. Do I think that we should be better informed and better knowledgeable? Yes. But I think we should also be open to helping these people in these severe pain conditions that we're not helping. And we are using a lot of opioids. And in the states that have introduced and legalized THC and CBD, the use of opioids has diminished by 25%. The use of the opioid deaths have reduced by 25%.
That's interesting, because I just read a statistic. The state of Utah, we are number 6 out of the 50 states that use the highest, we're the highest opioid, or the 6th highest opioid using, when you look at
per 100,000.
Yeah, per person. Why do you think that is in the state of Utah?
I have no idea. And I don't know why we're number 1 with antidepressant use.
Yeah.
Those are statistics that are gathered, and I really do not understand where all of that's coming from. But because I do, as a side, have an opioid addiction recovery practice, then I am very interested in any product that would help reduce the need for opioids in pain. And THC clearly has demonstrated that. And if the national statistics are correct, that there's a reduction in opioid deaths with the introduction of THC and CBD into the states, the legalization of that, that just means that all those opioid people, a lot of those opioid people are just looking for anything other than opioids. And that is my experience in my practice. They would love to get off of their opioids.
Yeah, no, I just went to, there was a Prop 2 meeting just that they were trying to support the proposition, the votes coming up in November. And there was a couple of people there that, there was a lady there and she showed me her bag of different medications that she was on. And I believe in pharmaceuticals, but I also believe that once you're on more than 3 pharmaceuticals, they're interacting with each other. And we have a lot of our Alzheimer's patients, like you said, on the Bredesen protocol. We have a lot of most of people the age of 65 and older, somewhere I read, are on 5 or more prescription medications. So are prescription drugs making us sick because we're putting so many people on so many?
Oh, absolutely. The interesting thing, of course, I spent 20 years in conventional medicine.
Yeah.
So the last 20 years have been in the more the functional medicine environment. So I'm seeing a different viewpoint of all of that. But conventional medicine has this drug, these side effects, this efficacy, this is how it's going to work. Then we have this drug, and then we have this drug. And so once they start putting drugs together, there is no research to support polypharmacy. So it's just a crapshoot. So once you're on 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different medications, we have no idea what the side effect profile of polypharmacy is and what the benefit, which we thought was the original benefit from this drug, what is the real benefit in the mixture of this polypharmacy. There is absolutely no research in that field.
Is there any research with that in the nutraceutical field with the supplementations? Or do we not have research there either?
I'm not aware of any research either. But again, it goes back to one of the basic philosophies, and that is, are herbs safer than pharmaceuticals? So the profile is going to be different. Are there going to be interactions? There are clear interactions with herbs. Mm-hmm. Just like there are specific interactions with polypharmacy. There are some drugs they should never be on. But my previous comment was not one of those drugs. It was just the whole polypharmacy soup out there.
Wow. Well, thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you for visiting. It's been delightful.
Yeah, it has been delightful. How do people find you? Because I know you work in a variety of different clinics. So how can we help people in the Utah find you?
Well, my office, Keys to Healing Medical Center, 801-302-5397. That particular number goes into an answering machine because in that office I'm kind of a one-man show. Uh-huh. I don't have a receptionist. I don't have anybody with me. So people call, they leave messages, and I get back to people. I set up everything in that office. I do have some other offices. Some may be familiar with Alpine Clinic here in Lehigh. And then I'm also in a office called Rising Health Specialty Clinic that's in Mill Creek on 33rd South and about 30th East. My addiction clinic is downtown Salt Lake City, 4th South and about 4th West.
Well, I think the world appreciates, and especially us people in Utah, appreciate all the knowledge and all the time that you've spent gaining this knowledge. And hopefully we can send people that are looking for anti-aging, rejuvenation, functional medicine, that we can send them your direction, and you can be a part of their healing journey. So thank you.
Be glad to participate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.